We deeply cherish the relationship we have with Canada. We think it is one of the most important national security and national interest alliances that we have. We cherish that the sons and daughters of Canada have fought alongside the sons and daughters of America, and many of them have lost their lives abroad in pursuit of peace and stability and democracy, as well as combating international terrorism. We may have disputes economically, but there are ways to deal with that. And certainly we do not believe that Canadian steel and aluminum is a national security threat to the United States of America. And so we have a very different view, and we wanted to express to the foreign minister as she returns to Canada that hopefully she will share with Canadians that the view of the president is not the view of all of the American people, and by far not the view of, I believe, a majority in the United States Senate.
Senator, how has the president affected Canada-U.S. relations?
Well, clearly every action has a reaction. That's just the reality. I asked the foreign minister, what about our engagement as we deal with China's unfair trade practices? Has this affected it? How about our continuing efforts to make sure that Russia is sanctioned for violating the international order in Crimea and eastern Ukraine, as well as what it's doing elsewhere in the world? What will it mean for Nafta negotiations? And I think that the answers to some of those questions was that Canada, and for that fact, our European allies still continue to hold the view that Russia cannot return to the G7 for so long as it continues to occupy Crimea and continues to have irregular forces in eastern Ukraine, that we are seeking a way forward on NAFTA, and that Canada has joined us in some of the actions through the regular trade processes as it relates to non-tariff trade barriers with reference to China. So this is a critically important ally to the United States, and you don't give your back of the hand to some of your closest allies. You can have a dispute, but there is a way to find a process forward.
Are the tariffs being used as a bargaining chip in the NAFTA talks?
You'd have to ask the administration that, but look, when you invoke 232, it's not only about tariffs. You impugn Canadians in a way that suggests that they are a national security threat to the United States. This is the longest, most peaceful border in the world between two countries. And I think that what I heard the foreign minister say, I'll let her speak for herself, but it's that Canadians were deeply hurt, not necessarily by the tariffs in and of themselves, although that's a challenge, but deeply hurt that America, its closest ally, would suggest that it is a national security threat. And I understand that. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. It's not search 2.
Bonjour mes amis, c'était
Hi, my friends. It was a pleasure
to
have this opportunity to speak to members of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the U.S. Senate.
C'était un échange
It was a cordial and very direct exchange of views. We spoke obviously of all the actions under Section 232 concerning steel and aluminum, and we also discussed Russia and Venezuela and China and our NATO alliance.
It was a real pleasure for me to have this opportunity to meet with the members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We had a wide-ranging discussion. Obviously, we spoke about the Section 232 steel and aluminum action. We also talked about Venezuela. We discussed Russia and Ukraine. We spoke about China. And I would like to say, point out maybe for the benefit especially of my American friends, that in our system, in addition to being a cabinet minister, and actually first and foremost, I too am a legislator. I'm a member of Parliament. I represent University Rosedale in Toronto. And so we in Canada really have a deep appreciation for and respect for America's legislative branch, American legislators, and it's always a pleasure for me to have the chance to speak to them directly. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer your questions. Well, Canada, are you speaking about the Section 232 case? Canada has been very clear about that. The Section 232 action, which is, let me remind people, a national security consideration, is frankly absurd. The notion that Canadian steel and aluminum could pose a national security threat to the United States, I think Americans understand it's simply not the case. That action is also illegal under WTO and Nafta rules, and we have raised cases in both tribunals. It might be worth pointing out as well that the United States, in fact, has a surplus in trade in steel with Canada. Canada has, therefore, truly, more in sorrow than in anger, announced a perfectly reciprocal, measured dollar-for-dollar retaliation response. We have published our retaliatory list. Our tariffs will come into effect on July 1st, and it may also be worth mentioning that in this action, we are joined by our allies and the allies of the United States, the EU and Mexico. These are close allies of the United States, NATO allies, US neighbors, who, like Canada, have been illegally targeted by these Section 232 tariffs. The answer is very simple. The US has to remove these unfair, illegal tariffs from Canada and from its allies.
Do you feel you need to marshal the coalition here, within the U.S. of people in the Senate to really kind of help you, fight the Trump administration and get rid of these tariffs?
I think that it's important for the senators to speak for themselves. They are all very accomplished legislators, and I know they're very able to do that. What I will say is Canada, of all countries in the world, I think we probably have the closest, deepest, most multi-level relationship with the United States. We are, after all, the largest market for the United States, larger than China, Japan, and the UK combined. We share the world's longest undefended border, 9,000 kilometers. We're friends, we're neighbors, we're very often relatives, so we know each other very, very well. And Canadians know very well that there are many, many Americans who understand and deeply appreciate that friendship with Canada. And speaking for Canada, to all of those Americans, I'd like to say we really, really value our relationship with the United States. It's very important to us. And as the Prime Minister said when we announced our response to the Section 232 steel and aluminum tariffs, we really are confident that at the end of the day, common sense will prevail.
So, Minister, what are you hoping these senators do now that you've met them?
Again, it's not for me to speak for U.S. senators. This is a group of extremely accomplished, really admirable people, and they will do what they see fit. We in Canada do have a very strong appreciation of the authorities of the legislative branch, and so it's important to have a conversation with U.S. legislators, with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to let them hear directly from us about what's happening.
Minister, did any of the senators offer any apologies on behalf of the behavior of the president, and did you accept this apology?
Katie, again, I'm going to let the senators speak for themselves. This was a meeting that was in camera, and I'm going to respect that. What I will say to the senators is it was a very good conversation. I was very glad to hear directly from them their point of view. And I would like to say to Americans, I have heard directly from very many Americans, ranging from Americans who live in my own riding in Toronto, to people who have just written directly to me. I've heard from a lot of people saying, you know what, we just want to let you know personally, we really like Canada, we like the fact that you're our neighbors, we like working together, we like sharing this great continent. And to all those Americans, I want to say, we feel the same way. Thank you.
What was your reaction to the comments from the White House trade advisor saying there's a special Trudeau, and has Mr. Navarro called Canadians to apologize for those remarks?
Well, you know, my reaction was that speaking as Canada's foreign minister, the government of Canada does not believe that ad hominem attacks are the right way to go about foreign policy, to go about foreign relations, particularly when it comes to foreign relations with your close allies and neighbors. So that's our way of doing business, that's our way of conducting ourselves in the world, and that will continue to be our way of conducting ourselves in the world. And I do want to take this moment to thank every single member of Canada's Parliament. Our Parliament passed on Monday a resolution that had unanimous consent. Every single Canadian parliamentarian supported it, and this resolution supported Canada's action with the retaliatory tariffs and strongly supported our Prime Minister in the face of ad hominem attacks. So it's nice, it's very nice to be representing a united country. As for that, I think that's a question for Mr. Navarro.
Would you comment on the status of the Nafta negotiations?
I had a good meeting with Ambassador Lighthizer on Friday in Charlevoix, and I'm grateful to Ambassador Lighthizer for making the trip. It was a constructive conversation. I spoke to Ambassador Lighthizer again on Sunday, and Ambassador Lighthizer and I, schedules permitting, are due to speak tomorrow, and I'm glad that we'll have that chance to talk. My message était la même que j'exprime
My message was the same as the one I'm transmitting right now. My message was that Canada's viewpoint is that these tariffs on steel and aluminum are illegal.
Et ne sont pas justifiés.
And that they are unjustified.
J'ai expliqué les raisons pour notre rétaliation.
The reasons behind our retaliation. And I also provided some facts on trade between Canada and the United States. And the senator thanked me for basing my arguments on facts. We also talked at length about the close collaboration between Canada and the United States concerning international issues, including the situation in Russia and Ukraine and in Venezuela, as well as our NATO partnership. And we discussed as well China.
So as I've said, when it comes to NAFTA, I had a good meeting with Ambassador Lighthizer on Friday. He came to Charlevoix, Quebec, and we had a chance to talk. I spoke with him again on Sunday, and schedules permitting, I am due to speak with him on Thursday. We believe that it's important for us to continue working on the NAFTA modernization effort. It's something that Canada has supported from the beginning. And, you know, in terms of the best approach to the NAFTA negotiation, the reality is that NAFTA today is a trilateral agreement, and that trilateral agreement has been in place for nearly a quarter century. It is also the case that we have been for now, I think it's 10 months, working at this modernization. It's not unusual for trade negotiations to take some time. Trade agreements are complicated beasts, and we have been making some real progress in updating and modernizing this agreement. I think the prudent, the common sense approach is for us to continue that effort, and I'm looking forward to having that conversation with Ambassador Lighthizer tomorrow. I have also been in close touch, including this weekend, with Ildefonso Guajardo, my Mexican counterpart, the Mexican Minister of the Economy, and we have been discussing NAFTA as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.